Hello, I'm Linda Seith from The Layered Onion. Thank you for joining us. We will be listening to our amazing creators talk about their art and mental health. 48 million artists all over the world share this lived experience. The Layered Onion was formed to create a supportive community, allowing the creators to focus on their art, bringing their work from the shadows to receive the recognition and opportunities they deserve. Each podcast will feature an artist who talks about their creations and mental wellness. Art is healing. We hope these discussions will inspire you to appreciate the stories behind the creations and, more importantly, inspire your inner creator. Together, we can tackle the stigma surrounding mental health. So, hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Linda?
I'm really grand, thank you. So maybe you can introduce yourself to the Layered Onion community. Tell us a bit about yourself, where you reside, and maybe talk about your art, because I know you both do visual and written.
Yeah, a little bit of both. So my name's Steve. Online, really, I mostly hang out on Instagram. So a lot of people know me as Steve Can Draw. Keeps it simple. Just by name alone, you know what I'm doing.
It makes me wonder what happened when you started writing your book. Should you say Steve can write and draw?
If you go on my website, it does say that. But
I did see that.
So online, you probably saw there's three things: illustrator, writer, coffee addict. So there you go. Those are the three. So I live in British Columbia in the Okanagan, arguably the most beautiful place on earth, and I'll fight you for that. But It is gorgeous. We've got out from my front window, I can see the lakes. Behind our house is a mountain. Like, we're just nestled in a gorgeous area. So like I said, an illustrator. So I spend a lot of my time illustrating, drawing as a practice. I try and draw every single day, even if it's just 2 lines on my iPad. It just is a good discipline for me to stay in that. I do, and then I pair a lot of my my illustrations with writing as well. Some people like to put a picture out there and not really, like, leave it a little more interpretive, if you will, for that. We've got so much going on that we're guessing every day about. To me, I just kind of put it out there and kind of let people know what I'm actually thinking and make it a little easier for everybody and share some of my story with folks. I also, with my art, you might see a big mental health advocate, especially men's mental health specifically. I have a lot of focus on that. With my story, which we'll get into a little bit, it's very important for me to be able to. I feel fortunate to have a platform that I can speak on, even if it's just a little corner of the web. But being able to use that as a voice to maybe speak up for those who can't, or I don't know what it is, but make connections with folks who might need that, because I think we all fall in that bucket in some way, shape, or form. So.
Well, I know we connected through Instagram, and we obviously are all about mental and emotional health, and bringing people together from all over the world. And that's one of the things I saw that you talked about was community, and that your community where you live geographically probably isn't the best niche for you. And then it's a different crowd, and that you had different spaces, but you found that through the internet that you found you called it your tribe. And I loved how you said, when used appropriately, social media can be a really positive. Do you maybe want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. There's a dark side to anything, I suppose, if you want to go down that route. But you hit it on the head. Yeah, where I live isn't really, I haven't found those people, but really good depiction of it, actually. So I just recently, about a month ago, launched the second edition of a book that I wrote. And as part of that, I had it suggested to me that I form what was called a book launch team. And prior to that, I've never heard of that before. I just thought you put a book out there and all the people come and find it somehow. But it was a brilliant suggestion that a friend put out there. And she said, basically what you do is you ask some close friends, 30 to 50 is the goal. And you just ask them basically to, one, buy your book, which they're your good friends, they probably will anyways. 2, leave a review. And then 3, blast it on social media. And then to wrap it up, you do a little party. So we had a little Zoom party afterwards just to get together. And the one thing I loved about it was I'm looking on the screen and I'm seeing person from Tennessee, persons from Florida, one from Saskatchewan in Canada. And I looked at it and I'm like, these are people that I never would have thought to connect with in the sense what a tribe looks like. But some of them are part of a writing community for me. Some of them are part of a illustrative community. And some people are just, I don't know where they came from, but they like my art, and we had a good conversation about mental health. So we all kind of came together in that respect. But about almost a year ago, I was invited to come speak at a local high school into an arts class because they wanted to have some people that are actually in the field in illustrating. And I was invited into that. And one of the assignments prior to me coming and doing a presentation, which I had no clue they were supposed to do this, was they were supposed to research me online, go through my Instagram, which I was a little on the spot with. I was surprised. But one of the questions I got, and this is a 12th grade class, so ready to graduate. And one girl looked specifically and she said to me, "Nobody says anything mean about you online." And the question caught me off guard a little bit because I thought, well, why would anybody say anything, mean or, pull my character down? She said, that is very rare because she said, as a teenager in our climate, she said, Instagram is not a safe place to be generally. Like there, and she's like, I went back to when you started, and she's like, I went through all your comments, and nobody had anything negative to say. So she just asked, do you pull those down? Like when somebody comments on your art, do you delete it? Well, I've honestly never really had any negative feedback in that regard, and it really got me thinking in that moment. I thought, man, I'm probably fortunate, or maybe I'm not pushing the envelope enough to get negative feedback, but also you find the right people. The tricky thing with online is, it's a numbers game for some people if you let it. But I've always said from day one, this is a relational point for me. It's about connections. I would never count followers. I don't sit there all day saying, oh, it went up by 3 yesterday or 3 went down, whatever it is. To me, I count the connections. The right people will find you when you put yourself out there and you're your authentic self. That's the most important thing I find. So absolutely it can be there, but I haven't had that dark side myself. I think it's important to protect yourself and maybe set up some boundaries if you're finding in that. But I also find some of the people that I've connected with that have had that negative experience, I don't want to say they're looking for it, but if you go into certain arenas, you're probably going to find it. So to me, as a safeguard, it's look for those things that bring light into your life. One of the influencers I follow, she has a thing called Unfollow Friday. She said too, if you are following somebody online that does not serve you, if you're following someone online that is not adding value to your life and what you're doing every day, why are you following that person? Why are you seeking connections that don't serve you and you don't look forward to? So she said, maybe it's a good practice to step away from some of those influences. And I found that really profound. I've been enjoying that. So I haven't gone through my list yet and deleted a bunch of people, but just saying as a practice, I think there's some merit and some value to that for all of us.
So I think you need to create some digital art for that and put that out on your Unfollow Friday. Because that's one of the things I love about your illustrations is the messages that are attached. Some have none, but when you click through, you talk about it. But some really have profound messages. Like the one I absolutely adore is the phone charger in front of the face, saying, my phone recharges quicker. My phone recharges quicker than I do. And many of us with mental health challenges definitely feel that we just need time, space, a moment. So I think, do you find that those that have words, people like write them at, are drawn to those versus those that don't? Like the one that I would love to hear about is there's the cactus coming out of the flower pot. Okay. Without clicking through, I'm not sure I would get there.
The cactus with the flower pot. I've done a few cactuses. Is this on the website you're seeing this one?
Yeah, it's Ghost Cactus.
Oh, yes. That was actually one of the first illustrations I did when I stepped back into illustrating a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
And
So,
it's the theme and message behind that for me was it was about that inner spirit that's there, and maybe sometimes we have to put a rugged exterior on us. We feel like maybe we have to get our guard up. We have to
ah,
um kind of put a brave face on, if you will, when really there's something going on underneath. And you're going to find that with a lot of my art. And I think that's a great question. I often ask myself that when I create something. I'm like, does this need a caption or does it not? And I like to mix it up. I don't ever want someone to come across my work and say, oh, well, that's just what Steve does. He only draws cactuses with ghosts underneath. Like, I want people to come in and be like, hey, this guy dives into mental health topics. He talks about his epilepsy. He talks about some of the struggles, but he also draws some pop culture references. He also likes to have a little bit of fun. To me, I don't want to get typecasted as just the one guy that does this one thing. I'm expressing all areas of my life. And I think to
mhm,
circle back to that point of mental health, we need all of that because there's some dark days, but there's still some fun that can be found in the day to day. So we need to have a good balance of both. But with those messages, sometimes I think that I read a statistic the other day that said when you're in a visual space like Instagram, you have 3 seconds to capture somebody's attention because people are doom scrolling all the time. And so sometimes I put that message in there because sometimes people just need that little bit of something to pull them in and what have you. Maybe I get in the caption a little deeper with it. But we are, as visual creatures, more and more we're being trained, whether intentionally or not, to kind of keep moving on to the next thing. So sometimes that little caption speaks to folks, and maybe it speaks more than the image, or maybe together they make a nice cohesive beautiful thing for them. So there is intentionality on when I drop it in, when I don't.
mhm. Well, I think sometimes the message, sometimes in the mental health world, it resonates because you're like, I'm not alone, right?
Yeah.
And I think for those that sort of are, lived experience folks, it creates a community, right? It creates, oh,
Absolutely.
that I'm part of that. For those that maybe are I don't know. I think of the one where you have, what do they call those stackable dolls when the
Well, they call them a Russian doll. I'm gonna butcher the actual name of what it is in that language, but we know what we're talking about here. Where
yeah, you have
I don't even want to try.
you have one on your website. I think it's three, and
Yeah, yeah,
one is you, and then you keep going down to like the real core, right?
yeah, yeah.
And that one absolutely needs no words, right? Because it just says we are so many, and that's why we're the layered onion, because we're so many layers. And a Russian doll,
Exactly,
same image, right?
exactly. And I did a follow up later too, maybe a year or so after that, where I drew my character, and he was just actually had the only one shell left, like the last image, and he was kind of popping out of it as
Ah,
well. So for me, that was a little bit to show some evolution and growth because the image you're talking about is one of the, again, in my earlier days of illustrating when I started this platform, and it really, like you said, doesn't need a message, but with those layers, the way I see it is to get to the core of what's actually going on, our authentic selves that are in us. A lot of us have those walls up, so it's how do we get past those walls to that very, very vulnerable state of who we truly are, because through whatever stigmas or messaging that are out there, a lot of us have been trained to put those walls up. And this is, and we're all, I think, on the inside screaming to let that spirit or whatever, that inner core out. We just don't always know how to do it. And that's where this podcast, different communities that exist to slowly break down that stigma, we're also breaking down these physical and emotional walls that get down to who we are and who the core is. Because I think that heart, that's why we are attracted to these things. We're attracted to maybe some of these visuals and words because that inner part of us wants out, and it needs a connection to help pull it out. And if it's going to work through illustration or words, wonderful. Maybe it's going to look different for everybody, and it does. But that's some of, it's funny. Sometimes I'll create something like that. I'll create a piece, and then I'll go back after and say I'll attach meaning to it after. I don't even, I think, cognitively like make that connection sometimes while I'm illustrating, but I find meaning in what I do after. I'm like, that's what my authentic self wanted to say, but I had to go through the creation process to actually find the message.
So let's talk a little bit about the healing power of art, because what you're talking is the creative process maybe helped release, a message both to yourself and to others. Maybe tell me about how your path to art began and waylaid and came back.
Yeah, that's so as a young child, if you follow my page, you know some of the story, but for those who don't, I'll let you know. So as a young child, I carried a backpack with a pen and paper everywhere. We would go down to the store for a 5-minute drive, and I would be drawing. So I started really becoming interested in art at the age of 3. Vividly remember that. I remember my first pack of Crayola markers, and I recall. And by the age of 6, I'd become deeply inspired by Disney animation, specifically Beauty and the Beast. When that movie came out, it just blew my mind. And the behind the scenes where they would show kind of the lithograph and the layers of how they draw, I was like, man, that's what I want to do one day when I grow up. And had a course to do that ready, had my whole plan of how I was going to go to art school, where I was going to go, the course load. And then a little bit later into my teen years, had some folks speak negativity over me with the art, and I went on a different career path as a result. I listened to the voices, and I wish I didn't listen to those voices. If I could go back to high school Steve, I would give him a good shake and say, no, stay true to you. You know what's on the inside. But now stepping back years later, so shortly after I stepped into a different career than I was planning on, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And I had no idea I had epilepsy. The entirety of my life, I had been having seizures, and I didn't know I was having seizures. Because traditionally a seizure, the way media portrays it is you're on the ground having a convulsion. Right. And I wasn't having those. I was having these types of seizures where I would space out or I would do funny things, but no one was really noticing them. So I'd go to the doctor and I'd say, I've got these things going on. And the doctor would say, they just brushed me off. They said, it's you'll grow out of it, whatever it is. And when I was 20, I got in a car accident. While I had an episode, I drove into a retainer wall and totaled my car, got into the hospital with broken bones. And you have epilepsy. And I never would have crossed my mind. So that was kind of beginning a whole new chapter and journey of mental health, because now I'm like, well, now I've got a reason why I've been having these my whole life. Now what? One of the very important things for me with my epilepsy is I've always said since day one, this will not define me, let alone define my career. I never want to be late for work. I never want to have a seizure and miss work or what have you. I never want anyone to think less of me because of that condition. And so I have done my damnedest for 15 years in that career to fight it. I unfortunately got to a stage in my epilepsy where I had to take time off work. I had to go on long-term disability, and that crushed me. That was, like I said, I fought hard to never get to that stage, but unfortunately it got to the point where I had to. So I've been on disability for the past couple of years, and I just immediately felt depressed and frustrated because I did not want to be in that space, and I spent so much time and energy not getting to that space, and here it is. The silver lining of it all is it gave me an opportunity to slow down, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of assess what I needed in life, because all of that career stuff was now stripped away. So it's, what are you left with? And they kind of say you can get bitter, you can get better. Well, I spent a lot of time being bitter, but it gave me the opportunity to fall in love with illustration again. And I look at the paths that it's created, like you said, the tribe, the connections, and all these things. And more as I lean into it, I realize I couldn't see it then, but I can see it now, how all these steps were orchestrated for me. And I just had to step into it and lean into it. So if I had leaned into the dark parts a little earlier on, maybe I could have embraced the good stuff a little later. And it made absolutely no sense. But if I can give one piece of advice for anybody who ever has to go on disability, there's two things that keep us afloat, because when you do go on disability, it can be an incredibly depressing time. What your body wants to do is you just want to veg on the couch and you want to binge Netflix, or you just want to, it's very easy to do it. And I think there's a place for that. I do. I think there's a time and place. But the two pieces of advice that I've learned that helped me very well, it's going to sound a little silly. Number one, put some pants on. Put some pants on. Don't, it's easy to lounge all day. It's easy to wear your loungewear or your, PJs. But I found when I put some jeans on, I feel like I've got intentionality. Even though I've got nowhere to go today, it's just at home. I'm gonna tell myself in a physical response that I've got some purpose here. And the second one is, even though nobody really knows except for me, is I always wear some cologne every day.
Oh.
Because two things: fragrance is wonderful for the mind and can really be a powerful association, but also it tells me I've got somewhere to be. I've got something to do. And the thing is, what I have to do right now is to stay at home and get mentally well and get physically well. I actually have somewhere to be. Even though it's maybe not where I thought it should be, I do have some purpose in it. So you want to prepare for the day the way you would as if you were going to go do something else outside. You've got somewhere to go. It's easy to lay down and die. It's easy to say, I give up. But you're going to put something on your legs at the end of the day anyways. Why not make them some purposeful pants? And it takes 5 seconds to do a little spritz of cologne or perfume in the day. So these little things I find go a long way for your mental health. So they're not for everybody, but
right. Well, good advice, because, and I can tell you've maybe listened to the podcast before. Also, when you said you wish you would have listened to your younger self, that often comes up. Is people wish they would have listened to their younger self. But one thing I guess I want to circle back to is the tie to men's mental health. When in your path did you start feeling challenges? Was it when you were younger, or was it when you went through this process of finding out that you had epilepsy?
It's looked different in every season of my life. It's looked, I can go back to being in grade 3 or 9 years old and being bullied because I was the artsy kid. I was not the jock. I was not, it's difficult when it comes to finding your people. It's generally not in a classroom of 30 students. You might only have one or two others in there that are like you when you're a little bit in that creative mindset. And so in that sense, that's kind of where it starts. And you continue that on into high school. And for me, the mental health journey from there just then sunk into a depression. In my later teen years, prior to switching up some of my vocational goals, tempted to take my life. And some of that was due to some things I had going on with bullying, lack of friends, some home stuff that was going on too. It just kind of got to a point where it just got to be too much. Then a couple years later, we've got the epilepsy journey. All of a sudden, I feel I'm not enough. The reason I think I really felt that way is I have not been able to drive a car since I was 20. I'm coming up on 38 now. And most people won't ever understand that. That is a freedom and an opportunity that you have to get yourself to the grocery store on your own volition. For me, it's my wife is fantastic support. She's incredible. And she's never thought twice or made me feel like lesser because of it. But still, my brain goes there and says, you're not enough because you can't do the simple task. Epilepsy wins. And as we progress through the mental health journey, it's, okay, now you're not enough because you're not the breadwinner because you are on disability. You're not enough because of XYZ. It keeps happening. And so I feel the more I've spoke to men over the last couple of years that have those mental health struggles really profoundly and feel like they can't talk about it, that's that phrase that keeps coming up over and over. I'm not enough, because we're comparing ourselves to where other people are at. I haven't advanced in my career enough. I haven't hit this mark in my life. And I find the big message I hear consistently, almost every man, I am not enough and I never will be. So we need to find those spaces to say, I am enough. I can do these things. Maybe I won't. And even now, I'm not the type of guy, I'm not a guy's guy in the traditional sense of I don't really care for sports. It's not my thing. Um, I don't crush beer cans. I don't that's not Steve. So I
Mm-hmm.
lean into more of who Steve is. And, if my next door neighbor wants to have me over for a beer, that's not really who I am. And if that's you, please be that person. Don't shy away from it, because at the end of the day, we need so many archetypes. We need not just the traditional male hero or savior that we need. We need all types to make a community. We all have different talents and giftings and personalities, and we all need each other. So it's really, men's mental health to me is finding what that is for you and what that path looks like, and how can you be the best version of that and embrace it rather than run from it.
Well, I definitely say that when we think about challenging stigma, I do think there is a bigger wall challenging mental stigma in men's health. Mm-hmm. And I've had a couple guests, and I had one who said culturally, as a Black man, it's even a higher bar because it is so frowned upon. And I guess I'm sort of mesmerized as I try to really research and look, when did this happen? When did this happen? Because, I'm a person who wants to kind of look at the root cause.
Yeah.
And how do we deal with the root cause so it doesn't happen anymore? Otherwise, you feel like it's whack-a-mole. You're just, the next trope, right?
Yeah. And as a father, I have 2 kids. I have a son and a daughter. And I look at that and being very conscious of what men's mental health looks like from my children at a young age. It's, what do they need? Mental health is still going to affect them because it affects every person. It's not a disease. Mental health isn't a disease. It's just like physical health. We all have things that we can do to work on and improve it. And that's wonderful. And what tools can I give my children at a young age and as they grow so they feel nurtured? And one of the big ones I know that myself growing up with, and a lot of other men, and it's still being perpetuated, is this concept that boys don't cry.
Oh, I know,
and
that's
do not
terrible.
Cry. It is just one of the most cringy phrases I've ever heard in my life. And for me, if I can give my son the space to cry at a young age and foster that and let him know, basically create an environment of support for him. I'm still a human being and I mess up as a parent all the time. We all do. But at the end of the day, if we can create that environment of love, that's really where it starts. Mm-hmm. And let them be who they authentically are. So,
and there are definitely other cultures where men crying is perfectly fine. And absolutely. So that seems to be certainly true in the US and Canada. I think, in other parts too, but it just is interesting. That is cringeworthy because when I worked in a more traditional business setting, mm-hmm. As a woman being emotional, so we want men to be more emotional. It was so I can be emotional and I can cry at the drop of a hat, and that was so frowned upon because I was being viewed by men.
Yeah.
There was no value placed on, so it was hurting from the other side too, of not only could they be their genuine selves, but then when someone else was being more genuine, it was up against what they were taught, right?
Absolutely. There's so many social and environmental factors that go into it. It's hard to say one size does not fit all. It does not exist. And even with that, I found for me to say very profoundly at the beginning of this conversation, I'm an advocate for men, or for mental health specifically with men. Already, I never want anyone to think that the work that I'm doing is ostracizing women or saying that
Right,
your
right,
voice
right,
doesn't
right,
matter either. But
right.
it's a tricky balance that way. The reason, whereas I'm going to say 95% of the time, women come back to me and say, I'm really glad that you're doing what you're doing for men's mental health because my husband needs it, my partner needs it. You know, I've got men in my life that feel like they need this, and there's not a lot of voices out there. And I haven't arrived yet either myself in that journey. And that's what I'm excited about is I'm going to have good days, I'm going to have bad days, and I'm open to sharing all of those because that
Hmm.
normalizes it.
Right. And that's what our path, the layered onion, we're really working so hard to just normalize, because if we talk about it and we are authentic, etc., then if it makes one person feel like it was easier for them to talk about it, then it's worthwhile
That's a
for
win.
sure.
I said that too when I think having this time off from work gave me some of these opportunities to even, like I said, write a book. And I always told myself, if one person reads this, if one person views it, it's life changing. It was worth it. If one life is saved, if one, and I've had a few now, like I said, that stepped away, that they stepped away from suicide because of some
Mm,
of the work that I was able to do. And I was fortunate to be able to take some of the pain and connect with their pain and pull them out of the situation unintentionally. It was worth it. So in that regard, I've already achieved what I wanted to do.
so
And
maybe
now,
talk about what is the name of your book, and
so
I'd
it's,
love to hear the process of actually writing it.
yeah. So the book is called Thin Spaces, and we haven't dove into this, and we won't get too much into it. But I do have a religious background, which is what I did start, um, which is where I course corrected, and I used to be a minister, a pastor in a church, and that's what I went to school to go do. So some of that art journey, well, it was frowned upon me work doing or pursuing art in that setting. And I didn't know how to be any different, but I felt like I had to kind of give that up. I was basically told to kind of given almost an ultimatum, like pick one, choose the art or choose the church. And with that, there came a lot of church hurt, a lot of, I used to say it was emotional abuse, but someone's told me recently it was actually spiritual abuse. It's more than just saying church hurt. It's people genuinely hurt you to the point where, I've been processing these things through therapy and discussing it, and they still kind of stick with me. So in this book, I explore a lot of that. So thin spaces, no matter what you believe, I'm open to everything. I think we all have our paths and ways. The core of it is let's find love, let's find acceptance, let's find it. And we all have different paths to getting there. So this is my story and my lens. So I've basically written a book on my experiences and how I've been able to find in very mundane day-to-day moments what it's like, or ways of connecting on a higher spiritual level, ways that maybe seem out of, could be washing the dishes, it could be something very simple. And this thin spaces idea actually comes from Celtic spirituality, where they believe that there are very specific places in the world, physical places that you can travel to, where they say the veil between heaven and earth is so thin you can reach out and touch into the spiritual world. And when I found that concept years ago, I thought, why couldn't that be every day? Why couldn't that be day to day? Why do I need to travel to Ireland to have this experience? Why can't I find the ordinary and mundane moments and appreciate the higher power, the energy, the God, whatever it is for you in the day to day? Because I think some of that does tie into what mental health looks like as well for us. So I wrote a book on that, and every chapter is a different story from my life and a different lesson I've learned and a different way of experiencing that space. And I encourage readers of it to find their own spaces too. It's really, and the book is raw. I'm not holding back from anything. It was written in a poetic and a prose format. So if you pick it up, you'll see immediately it looks different than most books, and it's got my illustrations in it. It's got, even on the cover, it's got a image of a character I draw often, and he's basically kind of peeling away his skin, and there's a skull underneath. And what that represents for me is vulnerability because we're stripping, again, like we talked about at the beginning, we're stripping away the layers. And that's what I did with this book. It's here's where it is. And again, so many people have found their story within my story. And that's incredibly comforting. To have somebody come back to you and say, you wrote my story and you didn't even know me. That's a really cool feeling. So that's what it's about. And the process of writing it, try not to let it be daunting. So what I basically did over the years was I took kind of journals and different things that I'd written, maybe thoughts on my phone, and I just sat down and wrote them out on by hand, and then just took it to the computer. And one thing I made sure I wanted to do in the writing process is I wanted it to be very fluid, not linear. So I didn't want to say, here's my intro and here's my conclusion, and pardon me, here's how we're going to move through it. I kind of wrote each chapter as an individual siloed thing, and then found, just kind of happened, there was a weaving of it. It was almost like it was sewn together in the right order and in the right space. When you open the book, there's a QR code at the front, and it takes you to a playlist I created on Spotify. So every chapter has a song that correlates to it, that attaches a certain emotion as well.
That's a lovely idea.
Thank you. It was a very interactive experience. I wanted people to have a tactile experience, not just read a book, but be able to have an experience and find themselves in it in their own story.
I've never heard that. That's really a lovely idea. What gave you that idea?
This whole thing stemmed from a project that I did back when I was preparing for ministry, and it was through a project, and all the assignment was create a piece of work, a piece of art, something in which you have experienced spirituality. So that's actually where this thin spaces thing came from. And that's where I came across this idea of through Celtic spirituality. And I started to find ways of doing it. So I took this book and I found a stick of incense. Smell comes back to smell for me. And it was sandalwood. So I put it in there. I grabbed a bag of chamomile tea because I thought, this represents rest for me. And then one thing I kept finding through it all was music kept coming back over and over. Instrumental music, metal music, acoustic, all these different areas and facets of life. So I burnt a CD, if anyone knows what a CD is. And I put this at the back of the book to accompany as it went through. And my professor that read it afterwards, who listened to the CD throughout, he said that was next level. He said, music touches all of us. It's a universal language. Even if we don't speak the language, it touches all of us. So that was part of it. And a lot of folks come back to me and say that is one of the coolest parts of this book, that I can connect with it visually through the images that you've illustrated. I can connect with it by reading the words, and then also this added layer of music as well.
Yeah, it's really 3D. It feels very 3D. So, because you're touching multiple senses, it's that's amazing because, I have found when I write or when I'm illustrating, I like to listen to music that's not English because, and I've found I've really loved rap music that's not English.
I love that.
And I think it's because of the cadence and the beat, right?
Yep.
But it's been, for me, really interesting how it's, I think, helped me be a bit more creative because it must be touching a part of my brain and challenging it with, of words I don't know, right?
And maybe that's less of a distraction.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Because then you're not hung up on words specifically. You're hung up more on, like you said, embracing the emotion of the music itself. I've actually found this with a few Icelandic bands as well. I know some people know Bjork, or Sigur Rós is another one, where you can listen to some music that, to your point, isn't even your native tongue. So you're really just focusing on the ethereal portions of the music. So
right.
Yeah, no, I'm resonating with that as well.
Yeah, well, bravo on that. That was a grand idea. So very cool. So let me ask you this. What would be you're just partway through your journey As you can see, I might be a few years further in my journey. But
Well, if I
as
pull
you're
the hat off, you might see a little different. But sure.
as you think about um, even just the next few years, what kinds of things do you think would be messages that you could share or think about or ponder with people as you're talking to folks about mental health and art and the synergies between?
Hmm, that's a great question. One of the questions that I've been asked recently is, so when's your next book coming out?
Mm,
And that's because there's almost like this expectation. If you wrote one, you're probably going to write another one. And interesting little tidbit behind that. So like I said at the beginning of this, like I went kicking and screaming essentially onto disability. And on my very last day of work, when I knew I was going, one of the supervisors who worked for me, he kind of looked me in the eye and he'd read my book before. And he said, hope you know that your next book is about to be written for you. And what does that mean? He said, I
mm,
think you're stepping into a season of your life that people are going to need to know about. And you're going to figure it out and you're going to find your way. But I think your next book is going to happen in the next couple of years. And that is going to be something that I do plan on. I've got started dabbling into a bit of the writing here, but so my message was kind of some of the hurt previously. And now I think this new message that I'm stepping into, that as I'm finding my way through this season, is it keeps coming back to what does it mean to be my authentic self? Because I had to pause in my life on this journey to find out who I actually am authentically. And if I can help other people through my story find those places, that's where I would like to take this next level. Artistically, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, but what my intention is I want to be more and more and more vulnerable. And that's scary because that means I'm going to have to tap into some of these past memories and share them for maybe the first time, share some things that maybe have come up in therapy. I don't share everything. We've got to keep some things, personal, and that's healthy, but
mhm,
it's going to get more and more vulnerable. We need that. We need some of those things. And that's where I foresee it going. And I believe a lot in synchronicity and synergy out there. That's one thing I found in the last couple of years because I was able to make the decision and say, okay, it wasn't easy, but to say this time off is not going to be my depressed era. This isn't going to be where I'm going to lay down and die and I just can't pick myself up. Got to figure out. So what I've done is I've put myself out there, the digital world. I've put myself out there into the world, and I'm receptive now to say whatever is going to happen, I believe is going to happen. It finds its way, and people have, because I've taken that step of putting myself out there, the right people have come to me. And I
mhm,
truly believe in that. I believe that if you do that, these things will find their way of working out, but you have to be open to that happening. If you were closed off and if we're in those shelled layers all the way down and you're hiding in the corner, no one can see you. And it takes a lot of bravery and it takes a lot of confidence and courage to do that. But if you can put yourself an inch or two out there and open up to whatever is waiting for you, I think it's going to find you. And that's where I see myself in the next few years, going deeper and deeper down that path. And the right people are going to come. They always do. I connect with folks that had one reach out to me a few months ago and say, oh, I want a book cover. I'm writing a book. Would you design my cover? I really feel like you're the right person. I never would have expected it. And next week her book is getting released and it's a beautiful cover. I'm very proud of it. And she gave me a good
cool.
nudge and push I love it. And I'm so proud of myself for that. But as a result, I've had a few more people connect with me and say, would you do my book cover?
Ah,
Would you? And so again, it's not about drumming up business. It's not about that. I think that, like I said, if you show up for yourself, I think other people are going to come their way. And it feels lonely at times.
mhm,
That doesn't mean that all of a sudden all the friendships are going to come crawling out of the woodwork because that doesn't happen. If you don't put that little bit of effort and work in, it's not, don't expect it to come to you in that
mhm.
sense.
I
I know
do
that's a
think
tricky
that's,
message.
yeah. I do think that sometimes as a creative person, it can be a very solitary effort. And it gets, especially if you're an introvert, which I am, it makes it really easy to sort of hovel, you know?
Yep.
And so your words are kind of resonating with me about sometimes you got to put in the work. And it's not easy because it's counter to both your artistic self, but it's counter to your introverted self. And it's just like putting yourself out there.
It's true. It's a hard realization, especially. Have you ever done a Myers-Briggs assessment?
Yeah.
What are you on the Myers-Briggs? You
Uh,
remember?
no, I think I am on
FJ?
INFJ. No, I'm not a J.
J?
No.
INFP is another one that's pretty common if you're in the artistic space.
INFP.
But you think so? Okay. And I'm an INFJ, which is the least common out of any of them. It's the smallest population. And again, that tends to be what most artists or creatives fall into, more or less. But generally tend to be the empaths.
Yes,
We
definitely.
tend to be that sort of person. So we always have that feeling nature about us. I actually found this interesting recently through some of my epilepsy journey. I had a brain scan done recently. I've had many, and I found out that my amygdala on the right side is quite large compared to the left. He said, well, and the neurologist said a lot of our feelings come from that area of the brain. So he's like, before even knowing you, he's like, I bet you're a pretty emotional guy, huh? Yep, I am. He's like, it's incredible what we can tell from the brain and how it interacts with us.
Here is a question that I kind of am thinking about is as you look at your art and you think about healing, have you found a difference between written art healing and, doing your illustrations and art and healing? Because I think they encompass different parts of us. So can you talk about art as a healing and if you feel something different?
This is a really good question, and I've never actually considered this before this moment. And you're getting the wheels going in my brain, and I'm having a bit of a epiphany right now.
Oh, cool.
When I illustrate, there's healing. I'm putting that out there, I think, for other people with healing. I'm putting it out there. It's almost more for a point of connection and me offering a hand to you to say, this is what I've experienced, and maybe you'll connect with it. But I find the writing creativity is more for my own healing because they're able, sometimes even with journaling, and last year I tried to make it a practice. I didn't do it consistently, but I tried to get into journaling practice and almost, some of it call it lucid journaling, but even just literally tapping into whatever you want to write. Even if I just write on the page over and over again, I have nothing to say today. It's at least still that practice. And I've actually found that personal healing for me comes more from the writing side. And maybe that's why I shy away from it a little bit sometimes and I lean more into illustration because it gets a little bit more vulnerable with that. So that's a really great question. I need both to be me, but they both have their different areas that they lend to. So I'm probably going to write about that now.
Well, I really, really enjoyed talking with you. And the one thing, I see your coffee cup. I'm also love coffee. And I have to tell you, there is something soothing. I always say that if I had to go on a deserted island and take one thing, I would take coffee.
Oh, yes. That you probably said that desert island game, right? Where
Yeah.
they say like, what would be the movie, the whatever, what would be your food?
For me, it would just be coffee.
I say that too, and I always get challenged. Oh, that's not a food. Like, well, it's food for my soul. So
yes, yeah. Bring coffee beans. You can grind them up, and you can do all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I agree. That's my thing. So, well, thank you so much, and yeah, look forward to connecting more.
Me too, and thank you for this. I love this conversation, and it was good. I learned a lot from it too, not just me putting it there, but also the exchange.
Well, and that's our hope. That's always our hope, for sure. And I
Exactly.
do see you have an illustration behind you.
Mm.
And I can't quite, something to wander.
It says prone to wander.
Oh, prone to wander.
Yeah, yeah. That's from it was when I was growing up in a church, that was a line from my grandma's favorite hymn. So I put this together for her on her behalf. She's passed now, but it was something to honor her. And it's actually one of my most popular prints that I've sold. People really resonate with it because there is this sense of feeling that people do want to wander out there, but often feel like they can't. So a lot of people like that. And of course, the nature visual that goes with it. We're drawn to nature. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll connect again.
All right. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. It is an honor to talk with these amazing creators. You can see and read the artist's work in the Shallot, our journal of mental health, art, and literature, or on our website, thelayeredonion.com. Thank you.